You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching The Meta Show.
And welcome everybody to the Meta Show. It is Saturday, March the 24th. We've got a pretty good solid show lined up for you guys today. Thank you all for joining us. I know that there were plenty of other Twitch opportunities for you to view EVE Online today with Twitch versus EVE happening at the same time as the show. So we're happy that you decided to join us. I'm Bruce Grubal, your host, and I am joined alongside, as always, the Matani.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. No, it's going to be an interesting one here, guys. We actually haven't had Rise on in a while. We're going to have CCP Rise and CCP Signal, who is, I think this is going to be his first time on the show. So our producers have spent the last several days coming up with a whole bunch of interesting questions that we're going to be diving into. And also, you guys in chat can get in on the action as well. When we take questions, we will shunt those questions over the devs. And I'm trying to keep track of what's happening. It looks like we have a little bit of a hype train thing going on. Things are happening. I'm wearing even more blue than I was before. This is the next iteration of our fashion experiment. And yeah, let's do this. So I do not have a rant today. I'm going rantless such that we can have more time for asking the devs interesting questions. But Brisk has a few words he'd like to say, and take it away.
Well, I just wanted to take an opportunity since, obviously with what's going on around the world, what's going on in the United States, right now, a lot of people are scared. Well, they're nervous. They're not sure what's happening. They're not sure how long this is going to go on. They're not sure if they're going to be able to withstand another 15 to 20 days or more sitting at home doing nothing but playing EVE Online and hanging out. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because it is the proverbial elephant in the room. And for a change, I am not the elephant in the room. It's obviously this virus. So what I wanted to say, and I think you all know this, and hopefully I'll be preaching to the choir, but one of the benefits that we all have because we play EVE and we're part of this community is we know that we have an entire network of people around the world who share our interests, who are there, who want to play, who want to talk, who are willing to listen and chat and enjoy spending a few hours, every day playing this game together. You have that network and you're not alone. So when I sit here and I worry about potentially what's going to happen down the road and are we going to be okay and what's going to happen to the economy and the rest of this stuff, I take solace in the fact that I know that there are a bunch of people out there who I can turn to and talk to when I get concerned about it. So take advantage of those networks. Take advantage of the fact that you're playing a game with people all around the world and we're all in this together, and that you have the ability to go out there and talk to people. And frankly, I think of all the folks in this country and around the world, we're probably some of the best prepared because we do have these networks. So I think, at least from my perspective, sitting at home and playing a video game on a Saturday afternoon, that's what I like to do. That's not something I'm being forced to do because I can't go outside. It's something that I would have chosen to do.
Please don't throw us in the briar patch. Oh no, not the briar patch. Yeah,
exactly. So for a lot of you, I know you're in the same boat that we are. So this is not exactly the worst possible thing that could happen. So in the end, like I said, push all the fears and the scariness and all that stuff to the side and just realize that we're going to get through this. Our country, at least the United States, the world has been through tougher situations. And the fact is, I think in the end, regardless of what happens down the road, right now, we have each other. And as is common, at least, we say in EVE Online, the best ship in EVE is friendship. And I think we all have that, and you all have that. So take advantage of those connections and be willing to talk to people. And if you're feeling down or you're upset or you're worried, know that you're not alone and share those issues and questions and concerns with your friends. I'm sure they have the same problems, and they would love to hear and take solace in the fact that they're not the only ones thinking that way. So that's my pep talk. I'm looking forward to spending the next hour talking about EVE, future plans of EVE. We have two great guests with us. And I think for for right now, there's nothing I want to know more than what is going to happen to this game that we all care about so much in the next 6 months. So with that, Mittens, if you're ready, I'm going to push the button. We're going to go to
Let's
our top
do it.
story.
Let's do it.
All right. All right, gentlemen, our top story today, as we have been hyping for the rest of the week, is we have with us CCP Rise, EVE Online Senior Game Designer, and CCP Signal, EVE Online Software Engineer. These are two of our very good friends from CCP. They're here to talk about a lot of the stuff that's been going on this week and a lot of the stuff that we're going to see on Tuesday with the new patch, as well as stuff that's happening in the near future. So, guys, thanks for being on the show with us today. Great to be back, homie. Happy to be here.
Having us.
Now, Rise, we know you. You've been on the show a bunch of times. You know, we're our team Talos, but Signal's kind of the new guy. So I want to give you a shot to come out here, introduce yourself to the Metashow community. Tell us a little about you. And I understand you're on Team Raw. If you could go over what Team Raw does, and that would be great too. So Signal, take it away.
All right. Of course, CCP Signal here. Kali, like some people call me at the office. I'm a software engineer, been with the company for 4.5 years now, 2 of which were spent on Rise's team until we got split up this summer. And just to give you an idea of the type of stuff that I've been working on, worked on the Abyss Mutaplasmids, the Triglavian disintegrators, the Muta-adaptive repairers, EAT filaments, Frigate Escape Bay, to name some stuff. Now working on Team Raw, the events team, with CCP Fossey as the game designer, CCP Deadlift as the QA, and CCP Trash Panda, our producer. And we have been working a lot with Team Talos, towards the themed releases, Dragonor Blitz and the Guardians Gala, logging campaigns and the skilling sprees. And yeah, want to work on these experimental features and more as well, try them out.
Yeah, just sort of a question about like how that works in practice, because I'm not a dev. I can't code my way out of a paper bag. I can barely add things together without asking somebody for help. So are you mostly like slinging code all day? Like you spend all day doing codey type things, or what do you do here?
Yeah, so I definitely
what do you do?
What I do
is you say you do.
I work on both server-side code and the client-side database stuff as well. Like EVE Online is just everything happens in the DB, so we do a lot of work there as well.
Gotcha.
And if I can add a little hype here, Kali is one of the bravest programmers I've ever met. So he's stepped into areas of the spaghetti that many are too afraid to venture into. And also, like a lot of our other programmers, I've worked with Cognac and with whatever Henrik's name is, I forget. But it's common that people pick up a lot of different roles for us. And so for a lot of the things that Signal and I have been working on lately, from the trig ships and disintegrators to the jump filaments to the new Frig Bay, there's a lot of design going on from his end as well. Like it's really normal that he acts as like a co-designer to figure out, often because of like technical limitations or stuff that comes up during implementation. So I think people wear a lot of hats, and Kali wears more than most.
Okay, like I warned the devs that we have sort of a list of questions that our producers have kindly enough researched and pre-prepared. But then when it comes to like follow-ups, it's sort of who knows where. So I don't know whether Signal is willing to answer this question or not. But when Rise said that he has actually stared into the abyss of a lot of the really wacky spaghetti code, is just one here for you, Signal, is if you can tell us, what do you think is like the freakiest, scariest aspect of the legacy code that you've ever, like where is it that is the where mortals fear to tread, that you have investigated?
Definitely, like our technical director often says, that you need to be dumb enough to go deep in some of that code. Like definitely dogma, which a lot of people talk about, our attribute system, really complex spiderweb, everything talks to it. The inventory system, some of the jump code has become quite webby. When we worked on the EAT filaments, for example, I think it was close to a week where I sat down with the technical director and we set up a plan to refactor some of it, which we did, which makes us be for the future we can add different kinds of jump and stuff more easily and faster.
This is a different kind of attribute. There's the whole system. You hate all the attributes in the game.
You're muted, Brisk.
I hate all of the attributes. I think they're pointless. I think that in the end, it would be better to just change, the rate that you get skill points using some other method. But it's not. It's like some throwback to Dungeons and Dragons.
Are you still muted,
Brisk?
Did you fix it?
All right, Brisk.
I fixed it, didn't I? I thought I fixed it.
Okay, good.
Okay,
right, I fixed it.
You're talking about attributes like character attributes that have to do with trading.
Are you which attribute? Is this different attributes?
Signal's talking about like the underlying attributes.
Our internal name for attributes, basically.
Like everything from
rate of fire, HP is an attribute.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right. I got
everything that controls how ships
our
work,
effect system.
Yeah, it's all based in this attribute system. That's a huge, big mess. And to talk about scary places where people you don't dare go, I want to bring up that we've been talking a little bit lately about clones and trying to get more than one clone in one station. And it was the first time I've seen Kali be like, nope, I'm out.
That bad?
No. It's not that bad, but it was like, I'll do it in a day, easy. But then you go look at it like, God damn it.
You know what? If you guys make that happen, I'll tell you. Not only will you reduce some of the structure spam, because half the freaking structure spam is clone based, so you can have more than one clone, but you'll make so many people happy. So I strongly urge you, keep going on that, regardless of how tough it is.
Tactic to bring it up on air so that he has to do it.
There you go. Exactly. We got you. We got you. We got you.
That's his MO always.
I like to commit Signal to things in meetings with leadership where he's not in the meeting. I'd be like, he told me he can do it in a day.
He'll do it in a week. You got voluntold. I love it. All right, so let's talk about, let's bring it back, because I want to talk about, in general, the pace of the change. Now, we're about to see the release on Tuesday. It's got the frigate bays and a bunch of other stuff in it. We've got, I guess, the weather stuff is coming up this weekend. Is that right? I remember saying something about, I can't remember what it is, but there's some events coming up, and there's going to be some other stuff going on. Now, you guys had said at Vegas that you were doing this fast 2-week kind of, pace of change, that every 2 weeks you're going to try to add something in the game. And so far, you pretty much kept to that. And then at the end of last year,
strictly kept to that. Thank you.
All right, exactly. You strictly kept to that. And then we heard at the end of the year that you guys were moving to this quadrant system where there'd be 4 sectors in the year, and each quadrant would be around a theme, but you'd still do the 2-week iterations, within that. Is that still the current pace? Can you guys talk about what the pace is going to look like over the next couple of months? Are you going to keep to that schedule or what?
Things are changing fast. We made the Vegas plan to commit to the 2 weeks till the end of the year based on Talos forming, coming off the summer, and just knowing that we needed to be able to do things much more quickly. Right after that, like just after the new year, we did a reorg around different sort of structure for the way the teams are set up. We distributed a bunch of people into the new structure, and then we have this quadrant system as well. And so that kind of, the way I described Talos has definitely changed, and we're not solely responsible for a 2-week cadence anymore. But a lot of what we were trying to do, just as kind of in the scrappiest way we could for that last quarter of last year, has been integrated into more of a broad dev strategy. So fast releases are very central, even in the quadrant system. We expect to keep that up. I wouldn't hold us to 2 weeks on the dot every time, partly just because the way the release timing setup varies a little bit, but we expect to keep moving really fast. I think we're putting out more in general volume of stuff right now than we have been in a really long time, and keeping up with about every 2 weeks should be no problem. But a lot of that responsibility is going to be spread out a little bit more. It won't all be Talos releases. It has huge, for now, huge contributions from Kali's team, and many of the other teams are also just looking at faster paces. We're building up better infrastructure for doing faster releases, like our process is improving to be able to support that, from everything from QA to publishing to art. We actually have now, you can tell me what you think, Kali, but I think some of the healthiest kind of cross-department and cross-team integration we've had in a long time. Like working with
Definitely.
publishing and marketing is feeling really good right now, working across teams.
I really want to give publishing and our community team a huge shout out, being like doing an awesome job recently, like with especially supporting with the theme and the quadrant stuff, really just made it so much better.
Yeah, and the quadrant stuff is helping us kind of sketch out road mapping a lot more easily, but then adjust within each quadrant based on new stuff that pops up. Like we've gained a lot of flexibility under the quadrant system without losing the ability to have some long-term vision. So it feels like for now it's all working out really well, but I would definitely want to move away from some of the expectations I put on Talos specifically, because we're just kind of making it all work as a whole a lot better now.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to shift over and ask another question here, which is, so one of the things that for me was extremely exciting was seeing the filaments being released during the sort of Christmas events, and then the frigate escape bay I think is fantastic. I'm like an old school battleship guy. Some of my favorite fights in EVE were always the sniping battleship fights during the Great War. And, ever since T3 cruisers were sort of implemented, battleships really sort of went by the wayside. Occasionally they would pop up in things like Baltic fleets, but Frigate Escape Bay, can't say enough nice things. Super, super cool feature. And also something I never heard of before. It was just like, this came out of left field. These dudes came up with it and they implemented it. And, there's also some other things like weather effects that have been put in here as well. And I was wondering if you guys could basically like tell us a little bit about like how those came about and what challenges you encountered designing it or developing it, or like you basically just tell us the story of how did we get cool stuff like the filaments and the frigate escape base.
You want to take you take the filaments, I'll take the rest.
Well, I mean, so part of moving fast and thinking from the perspective of just getting people excited rather than always trying to, I think we often get stuck trying to fix things or think about some system that's really kind of deeply problematic that's been around a long time. Common things are structures, SOV, balance, capital balance especially. And when we formed Talos and started talking about just trying to make people excited to log in any way we could without having to stick to those systems, a lot of creative stuff started bubbling up. There's tons of awesome creative ideas around, and we just tried to jump on some of those. And I think that it got a real kick from Signal here being willing to start prototyping really aggressively, even outside of work hours sometimes. And then once we got some working versions of it, it was pretty easy to just bring it in to the roadmap and attach it to the events. The thing I would pass off to him is another thing that we're trying to lean into more and more is using the ability to be limited time oriented or event oriented as a way to justify more experimental changes and see how they work out. And from that, we can bring them into the full game like we did with jump filaments after they turned out to be really positive. And that's exciting because it unlocks us to try stuff that might be a bit scary. And I want to push that as far as we can. I think having space that is limited time in some ways, that gives us the ability to try different things, or ships and modules that are limited time, anything we can do to allow ourselves to be creative is going to be positive.
It's just an easier sell both to the players and internally that we're not adding like technical depth to the game, and like if it's really successful we can make it permanently or keep it as an event or whatever if that's suited to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good idea in general. I mean, you essentially, instead of having the responsibility of like altering the balance of the game permanently by basically using in-game events and holidays as an attempt to basically put out like a minimum viable product of like, hey, let's just try this shit out. Let's see if it works. If people like it, then you can dedicate more resources to it. And if people don't want to touch it at all, the dogs don't eat the dog food, then you can go back to the drawing board. That seems entirely reasonable to me.
And yeah, with the weather effects, for example, we we've had these system-wide effects in the game for 11 years now since wormholes, and incursions have them, and the invasions needed them, so we put them there. And we really like the usability around it, or UX or UI was none to be seen. Like there was nothing telling you what's affecting your ship. And so what we did was, it was a perfect timing around the Wormholes with Love event, where we wanted to do these. We had these ideas of, hey, what if we have a warp speed weekend or something like that? But hey, we don't have any way to show the players that, which then it's just a shitty experience, and no one knows that they're actually flying.
Why is my ship going so fast? I don't understand.
Right.
Or not even noticing. And
right, or even worse, yeah, exactly.
So it was a perfect timing we got to work on that. Gave it to Wormholes, and now we can, in the form of the next release, we'll have a warp speed increase in low sec. Or you'll see it in the buff bar, and you'll actually see how much faster you're going. And sky's the limit.
Yeah, we can do a lot of crazy stuff with that if we push it.
So to talk about the frigate bays again, because I love this concept, but I want to hear more about were you guys just sitting around coming up with crazy ideas? Were it after how did that kind of
All right, so there is obviously a lot. I think both players, us, everyone. It's fun to sit around and think of crazy ideas. But the thing that I think's worked really well for both the jump filaments and the frigate bay, or at least hopefully works for the frigate bay. We don't actually know if it's fun yet. We'll find out in a couple days. But is trying really, and this seems obvious, but trying to solve a specific problem. And starting from that point rather than starting from the crazy idea. So for the jump filaments, it was a really simple problem, which is that people want to roam at small scales, but it takes forever. And so how can we speed that up without hurting, making something exploitable or something that hurts the integrity of the universe too much? I mean, we are ignoring geography a bit with it, but at least the penalty is strong enough that it doesn't cause any problems. And with the frigate bay, it may not even be the perfect solution for this problem, but the problem we're trying to solve is, how do we make it so once people go to all the effort of getting in a fight, getting to the most exciting part of the game, they're not unlucky and shot out of the fight in the first minute and then don't get to participate after that. I think that's a really unfortunate, necessary in a way, but unfortunate part of how EVE combat works, is that if things go wrong for you, you can put in 2 hours, 3 hours to find a fight and then wind up on the sideline listening to it in comms. And so this was just an attempt to explore ways to deal with that. How can we keep people on field even after the main, point of power for them is removed? How can they still participate?
And of course, both features, of course, had design goals. It's just like, we don't get to do we want to do this crazy, fun idea. Sounds good. Of course, it has to have some design goals behind it.
So how do you guys envision people using the frigate bays? I mean, what's your end goal? What would the victory condition be? How would you say, all right, these have been successful?
I mean, as long as it's fun and isn't causing some major balance problems and someone's using it, I think it would count as successful. But the real win would be that, especially to me, I didn't dare hope too much for effects at really large scales. It sounds like some people think that there is a chance for that, which is very exciting. But at least at small scales, if we can get it set up so that it's a standard thing to use, that works as an incentive to use more battleships because people want to fly battleships. But more importantly, it means that people just get to be in fights longer and we draw out the process of smaller fights. If that's working, I think it's a success and we can look at expanding on it. For instance, if that goes well and we want to push it up to bigger scales, we could put bays in battlecruisers or in capitals or whatever, so that there's more synergy between the frigates that are getting spit out and the ships that are exploding, so that it's easier to blend comps together. But this was kind of a way to keep the scale a bit narrow, but still get a good sense of whether or not it's doing its job. So
I mean, I just think that this whole thing is brilliant, and I'm delighted to hear that you guys are already exploring the opportunity of potentially adding this to other things. Because it sucks to schlep across half a galaxy and then get primaried.
Exactly.
And also, like, one of the things that I find really interesting about it from like a doctrine design perspective I don't spend too much time playing Eve, but doctrines have always, like, actually in the game, but doctrines have always fascinated me. And so having a system where, as you suffer attrition, essentially you're hiding multiple doctrines inside of your start of the fight doctrine, and then making sure that works. As you lose battleships, then you have either T2logy, or you have E-War, or you have a whole bunch of different things that you can design, such that you have your frigate rescue fleet that sort of pops out of your battleship fleet. There's a lot that we can do with that, and we're only just beginning to scratch the surface. So, like, one of the things, like, it's one of these design features that on the face of it, it's like, okay, a frigate pops out of a battleship, who cares? But if you really think about it at scale, when you have fights where there are thousands of players, and especially if we go back to using battleships more, thus thousands of battleships potentially being destroyed, and then putting out different types of fancy frigates of one kind or another, it just adds a lot of really interesting complexity to the game, and I think it's fantastic. I have nothing but sort of boostery kind of things to say about it. That
and
said,
to hop on your point real quick, I agree with that, and I think one of the reasons why I like it is, and I know whether this was your guys' intention or not, it seems very often that new stuff that gets added, say the yeet filaments, things like that, they're designed around small gang, but the frigate bay has potential throughout all the different aspects of play. High sec, low sec, in faction warfare, in big fleet fights, between the great powers and nullsec. That's the kind of thing that I think is cool, because you have something that changes that entire meta for everybody, and it's not just something that's designed to promote one sector of the game over others. Now, granted,
I really super agree and want to look for actually have the biggest kind of banger of a cross-sectional meta change coming pretty soon, but I want to do more of that. I think some of the most interesting times in my memory from Eve were times like when heat was added, or when rigs were added, something that no matter what type of gameplay you like, you have to reevaluate. Everyone has to shift in some direction or another, and I think a lot of the changes we made, the kind of strategy we've taken towards balance and new content, has tended to be targeted, tended to be narrow in a way. And so there's something interesting happening in the spot where we're making changes, but the rest of the world kind of goes on as normal. And I think making the whole, shaking the whole thing at once is super fascinating. So the Frig Bay is like a step in that direction. I think we can do even more sweeping stuff.
I also haven't noticed you guys mention, or I mean, it's been on the public test server now for a while, so I'm not telling any secrets, but you can definitely go in and out of the battleship as well.
That was the thing. We were talking about that last night. The ghostwriting aspect of this, I think, is pretty exciting, because that was something that you used to be able to do, and it kind of fell out of favor. But now you can go back into that.
We were sitting cool. I'm really excited to see funny stories come up. Like, it's such an Eve feature. There's going to be hilarious stories around that. You go out in your frigate, and someone steals your battleship, or these type of funny moments that are going to come up on Reddit, which I just can't wait for.
To be clear, just in case it's not clear what Signal's saying, you can eject. If you eject from the battleship before it's destroyed, and you have a frig in the frig bay, you come out in the frigate. So you have potentially some interesting options for baiting people or catching people by jumping out of your battleship to fly something else, and then jumping back in.
And
but if you're trying to deal with a frigate, for instance, they can fly into your battleship and steal it. So.
So you can board an empty battleship with a frigate.
Well, you have to be careful. That's the thing. That's why you got to remember the old ghostwriting techniques of, all right, as soon as you jump out, you got to lock your empty battleship so nobody else can get in it. Then only you can get in it, or stuff. I mean, just stuff like that. Like, it's the old days of like 2014, 2015 coming back. It's cool. I think that's going to be fun if we can make that happen.
Even with destroying it as a criteria, there's funny, flying cheap, insured, obvious, like dinking along in low sec in your APOC that's fully insured and barely fit, and then coming out in patented Brisker Ball 5 bill Nurgle to kill whatever it is.
There you go. Exactly right. Exactly.
Okay,
right. It'll be great.
So this is sort of related to this. it seems, and this is like I don't know whether it's a code question or just a will question or what, but it seems like right now CCP has been implementing things within the code base of the game that just a couple of years ago were sort of seen as being, impossible. They couldn't be done, or this, oh, it's too hard, or oh, the legacy code is, whatever, or just really, really difficult to do. Things like adding new missions to the game, etc. I was wondering if maybe you guys could tell me a little bit about like what has changed, or is there like a new tool set or a new system, or has something changed that suddenly what used to be impossible and too much work, now you guys are able to do a lot of things that we didn't think you were capable of?
I think it's a mix of stuff. It's a strategic shift. We have more people working on core stuff now than we did a little while back. So just there's smart people like Signal and Masterplan back to chipping away at things veterans are interested in, trying to open up new possibilities for us, which is super cool. So it's partly a strategic side. Also, something I think players don't hear about that much is what our level of investment is in our tools and our kind of dev infrastructure stuff. And that is we have been doing much more of that in the last year and a half than we had been before that. We have a whole section of the ecosystem segment that is like full-time devoted to improving things like authoring tools, how missions get made, how even things like new ships get made. That's all getting worked on a lot more right now than it has been in a while. So that's both making us work faster, hopefully, and then also unlocking some stuff that's been hard to touch for a while.
Nice. Okay.
Signal, you do most of the coding. Have you noticed? I mean, is that something you guys have been focusing on? Is making new tools so that you can do stuff easier, or what's? Has it just been that's where the focus is?
It's like there's not a lot of new tools. I feel like that around the coding. Like we've just been, it's just good old Python and.
But like for instance, you were working on improving FSD throughout all the stuff you're doing, so that like the tools that get used not by people writing code directly have been getting a lot of work.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. Like we have Team Gadget, who has been like awesome, just like plowing through our technical depths of like how things get authored mostly in our static data, and that has just been in 3 different places, like pretty bad, but and that's just has made things way easier. But code wise, it's just I don't know. For me personally, like I've been, like I said, 4.5 years at the company. Like for me personally, I've just become better at coding, of course. And like CCP, I mean, Rise was saying, we've just now been able to work on this type of stuff. Like we've always have been able to do it, but like recently, like with this new reorg, like we now have just segments where we can work within certain areas of the game, and super cool, super inspiring.
Very good. And I think I'm gonna go off script for a second because we're getting a lot of questions in chat of things that folks want to ask you guys. And to the folks in chat, I'm reading all of your questions, and I know Mittens is reading all of your questions. One of the things that we are trying to do, because we have Rise, we have Signal, we know the teams that these guys work on, we know the issues and the substance of the stuff that they're doing. So if we're not asking the question that you want us to ask, it's not because we're not paying attention or we don't want to ask that question. It's because these are not the right guys to ask that question to. Like Rise and Signal are not the ecosystem folks, so asking them about changes to rocks or mining or anything like that is probably not the best. And we don't want to do a show where we're asking questions to these guys where they can just say, well, that's not the subject that I work on, so I don't know. So we're trying to focus on the stuff that we know that they do. So I apologize if we're not asking the stuff that you want us to ask, but there's a reason behind all that.
Seems to me like most of the questions are about Mitten's suit, not about Eve. So.
Yeah, right. I don't understand. I think Mitten's suit looks great. There's nothing wrong with the way
this guy has analyzed how the suit. So this is one of the fun things about like Twitch channels is like. Basically, people will come in and try to mess with you in any way possible, and trying to criticize me about my appearance is not really gonna work out very well because I am extraordinarily vain, And after the love to club years, like it's really going to be hard for me to take an Eve player seriously when they say, Alex, you look bad, and people are going to make fun of you because we know that's not how these things work.
I think it's scary because you've been slowly ramping up your level of formality, and you're making me look bad now. I mean, you've got the vest on
this is cute.
and everything. I'm gonna have to wear a tuxedo on the next show or something because it's not.
Well, the other thing is it's a fun thing to do in lockdown, right? So what I've realized, and you guys who've been watching for the last couple of weeks have seen me do this, is I got this suit originally for a friend of mine's wedding, which is obviously not going to be happening in July because we're all in lockdown, and it was basically this titrating process or iterative process. Now every week now on the meta show I've been like trying to find, because me, I don't normally wear blue, and I actually have an answer for why these things don't sit quite right. Is that it turns out because I did combat LARPing back in the day, one of my shoulders is actually almost half an inch to a full inch higher than the other because of some sort of nerd sport related injury, and I found that out when I was getting stuff tailored for Royal Ascot last year. So there's a whole story as to actually why. Turns out one of my shoulders is actually a little bit higher than the other. So that's a very long-winded answer to a question that for some reason everybody wanted to know the answer to. But let's
get back to Eve, right?
Let's get back to spaceships.
All right. So one of the things that recently changed that we saw a lot of in the last week or so has been wormhole stuff. And I know that a lot of folks on the wormhole side are very, very concerned. And I'll put my hat on as a former wormhole CSM rep. That was a joke, guys. The frigate hole issue. Are you guys comfortable with where that sits right now? I mean, right now, a lot of the folks in the wormholes are very concerned that because of the way the frigate hole mechanics now work, it's almost impossible to roll them. That has made the gameplay around evictions completely different than it was before. We've started to see major groups getting evicted, and like HK when it went in, and TD Sin and those guys that got evicted by the other group. Is this kind of what you guys wanted? Is this working as intended, or do you expect that there's going to be an iteration on those changes?
I expect there will be iteration. It's hard to say exactly what it'll be. It's definitely been super interesting to watch. That change was really a technical change. This is often the case that technical improvements or exploit fixes lead to us having to look really seriously at design. And wormhole design has not gotten enough attention over the last 10 years, and this has really drawn a lot of attention to it. So we're watching. I think it's super hard to say where we want to end up, because obviously this change happened, then we had the most exciting week of wormhole events we've seen in a long time.
Exactly.
So you could make a really simplistic case that this must be a great set of changes. Believe it. I think
the wormholes would tell you that this stuff was planned months in advance, yes, so it had nothing to do with these changes anyway.
And I think the concern that this could be a huge disincentive to anyone going for evictions is very legitimate. One thing that's really hard is what I would love is to just be able to wait and see what actually happens to the ecosystem under these changes, to see if we have more moves like this or less. But it's obviously dependent on the actions of just a couple groups. These type of kind of big events are rare enough that that's just not really a very legitimate path. So we're talking a lot about this, and definitely we'll revisit it, but it's hard to say how exactly. It's very divisive too, whether talking to wormhole players or talking to designers internally. There's a really strong split between what people expect to happen with the frig holes sitting as they are. So we have to work through that. It's definitely not something we're done with, as well as the other part of the effect of this change was making rolling like C1s, for instance, a lot more work. And so that would be a simple thing for us to revisit. And it's just a matter of figuring out how this brought up for us internally. Maybe we need to go redo how, like, rolling wormholes was not intended at all. So finding a goalpost to refer to in the design is really difficult. Excuse me. And so we talked about, starting from scratch, like how do we want this to work? Do we need some dedicated structures or modules or ships that are meant specifically for this purpose? And that way we can design limitations with that purpose in mind, blah, blah, blah. But definitely none of it's settled now. We're paying attention.
If I can nerd out for 1 second, I actually had this conversation with Pando and Darkshines the other day. Don't ban us. We were talking about, wouldn't it be cool if, and that's how most of these conversations started. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a module that you could put on, say, like a Titan or a super carrier, that would let you keep a wormhole open longer, or increase the mass so that more ships could go through it for a certain period of time. But then in exchange, that ship had to sit there on the hole for X amount of time or something like that.
Yeah.
Something that would change the way that the entrance and
wormhole stabilizer memes aside, the system I think originally was intended to be very much like a nature, like an environment you had to navigate and couldn't manipulate very much. And of course now is something that's like heavily manipulated and well understood. And I think what you're saying is totally true, that we could design it specifically to be manipulated. We could say this is a geography that you get to really have a bunch of explicit tools for screwing around with, and they have intentionally designed trade-offs and risks associated with them, and that could be very interesting. There's all kinds of potential, setting up like semi-permanent networks, or manipulating what's allowed through in different times, or setting up traps for different situations. I don't know, there's so much potential that it was just not the direction they were looking when it was originally built. And so now we have to decide, do we want to sort of preserve the way that it's been working because that's what people are accustomed to, and we should respect that in a lot of ways, or do we move towards setting it up with the idea that people are going to manipulate it in mind?
Yep. Are we ready for cool kids mode, boss?
I think we are. So before I throw us into subscribers only mode, and the way that this works, guys, is if you have been supporting the channel, you can ask questions in chat, and then we will ask the good ones to our guests here if people have questions. But one thing, one of the questions that we had prepared before the show, I'm not actually sure whether this is what you were originally talking about now, because it's related to attributes and something that you said at Vegas. So basically, it was mentioned at Vegas that you did not like the way that the current attribute system works. And now, from earlier in the show, we know about this dogma system, and that there is a different in Devland. There's like attributes in like coder land, and the way that you guys describe things internally versus the way that players often think about like character attributes and like skills and stuff like that. So before I dive into this, do you when you said at Vegas you didn't like how the current attribute system worked, did you mean the character attributes, or were you talking about the dogma stuff from earlier? Or yes?
Talking about character attributes.
Okay, that's good. So then we can ask the question, which is, what are some of the challenges that are a problem that would be getting in the way of you guys reworking or looking at the attributes? And what would you ideally like them to look like if you could have it your way? What would you like to see improved about the attribute and SP system?
Ooh, it's such a big question, especially if you include SP, because we have Signal and I and others before us have talked a lot about just completely reworking the skill system. It's pretty clunky and unusable. Having a system where you train into a bucket and then spend skills later, where the kind of queuing and allocating of skills is a lot smoother. This would all be very positive for a lot of reasons. So there's a whole big set of aspirations there. And then attributes are pretty dysfunctional. We would like to completely change how that works, integrate it more with the normal training and skill system.
Streamline the system.
Yeah.
Just streamline the system.
Yeah, but the reasons that it's tough, there's a bunch of economic implications in the game. We have to make sure that LP retains value, that all the learning implants and everything else that's tied to attributes now still is worthwhile, or at least something is there instead that's worthwhile, so that all the places where those things are generated don't suddenly become worthless. We have to do a bunch of UI work to accommodate whatever new system we make. And now actually this discussion is expanding internally, because something that I think EVE players, we kind of take for granted, but is pretty bizarre, is that the character augmentation system in general, what's going on in your character's head, is incredibly invisible. You have a whole bunch of implants that are virtually impossible to browse in a sane way. They go into your head, into a list with no visual representation of what's going on. Or, we have a slot system for implants that's, you don't ever see it listed anywhere except in the market and in the attributes for the implants themselves. All of this should get like a really holistic new look that just makes understanding your character progression and how you upgrade your brain and how training works all usable and intuitive. But the bigger that conversation gets, the scarier it is to commit to go and work on, because you're talking about a very big project.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Just from one of the cool aspects of EVE is that it is this science fiction future universe, and there's all this like cybertech, cyberpunk stuff, and it doesn't really get much more cyberpunk than having implants in your head and also being able to be like a clone, altered carbon style, and the fact that is invisible and that you essentially need to like get your way up the learning cliff in the first place to even realize that you need to train cybernetics and do all these things and plug these things in, and then you just forget about them in many cases, which is why people lose slave clones all the time. That makes a lot of sense. Brisk, what do you got?
So I have a question more for Signal this time, because Team Ra, you do events. That's the events team, and one of the things that we noticed, and I've had a couple people ask me about this, so I want to throw some love to our Logi bros. Often, at least when you're doing events, when there are things that are happening in the game, and when they're doing things like the skilling spree or skilling as a means of communication, or those types of events where there are in-game rewards for going out and doing certain things, those things have tended to be combat related. And I was wondering, is there any plans to extend that so that instead of going out, if you get top damage on a ship, or killing a guy, you get 10,000 skill points. How about you rep somebody for a certain amount, or you ECM somebody, or you tackle somebody, something like that, so that our support role people feel like they have a chance to,
or an industry job or something.
Right, exactly. Is that anything that you guys are planning on doing down the road?
We definitely have talked about it, and the CSM brought it up as well, okay, at the summit, and it's definitely possible. So we'll be looking. I'm like not going to promise anything, but we'll definitely going to look into it.
I think that would be very well received if you guys were able to put something like that together. And I'm going to throw this out there. I know you guys aren't the ones working on it, but Logi on kill mails. We've been talking about that for 2 years now, and I think everybody got really excited that it was going to happen, and now it's kind of like back burner kind of thing. But
do you know the current status of that stuff, like the work that got started?
You remember when we worked on the mutaplasmids? I really wanted to, get abyssal modules, mutated to show the actual value in kill mail. So I really wanted to go work on it, but there was another team that was doing a prototype with a new advanced RapidMQ system that we were developing, but that team has been disbanded. So I mean, I don't know.
It's kind of an idea without a home
kind
of thing.
I mean, it's definitely it gets brought up often at the office, and I mean, it's just like we always say, priorities and stuff like that. But
all right. Hopefully somebody adopts that orphan.
I personally want to get it done. Like I would love to have abyssal modules actually show the correct values and logis on kill mails.
I mean, I think that's something that everybody would like to have. I mean, one of the things that my own issues with FozzieSov, and you guys don't have to have opinions with that, is always, one of the things we really did miss about the Dominion system of Sov was, of course, you blow up an iHub, like you have a contest, and then there's at least a kill mail for every single SBU or iHub that gets destroyed. But instead of making people answer awkward Sov-related questions, I'm going to simply drop one here from chat, which is something that I'm sure you guys are getting asked all the time across the board, which is from Koba Felix here: can we lose the red dots?
Wasn't there
not me?
I mean, yeah, not me, but wasn't there like on CC recently a checkbox to disable it?
That was a fake. That was a fake.
Was it?
We got
Jesus.
faked out by somebody being smart on Reddit and
I got faked out
photoshopping it in. I'll tell you, it made me laugh because I announced it on the show. I was so excited. This is great. And then as soon as the show was off, I went and logged on CC and saw it wasn't there. I was like, God damn it. I got freaking trolled. But I mean,
look,
hey, that would be great if they could do it. You know, you'd make a
this
lot of people happy if that could happen. If that would
this
happen.
isn't
So,
either of our teams, so we can't.
I understand. That's why we
really speak. But what I will say is that I think it's something we're going to actually struggle with a lot in the near future, with so much focus on solving some of the big problems for newer players. I think it's really common that that's going to cause friction for older players. In this case, like, yeah, regardless of how you could or should solve this particular instance, it's a real problem that needs to get fixed for people coming in, where the inventory system can be overwhelming. It's easy to lose track of stuff. This is a very direct and strong way to deal with that, and I think that that's something that we're going to have to keep facing as we try and. There's actually a lot of work you guys haven't seen going on for usability in the early game that you'll be seeing hopefully before long. That should make it easier for new people to understand what's going on in combat or in how the inventory works in other systems. And that work is super valuable. We just have to learn how to integrate it well with veteran needs as at the same time. And I think we can do that.
All right, so I want to move into, because we got about maybe 7 or 8 minutes left in the show, and I know that we've talked about a lot of stuff, particularly stuff that's happening soon and the things you've been working on. I think we want to talk about some more of the future plan stuff. And I'll tell you, the two things that we constantly hear whenever we talk about future plan stuff is everybody wants to know, one, what are you guys going to do about structures and when are you going to start doing it? And two, capital balance, when are you guys going to start doing that? And I know, Rise, you had talked about on Talking Stations a couple of weeks ago an EHP nerf potentially to capitals and stuff like that. Can you guys tell us, or just talk a little bit about future plans, about potentially, what could be, or what you're thinking about, or what you'd like to see with structures, what you'd like to see with capitals, and give us any kind of loose time frame on when we may or may not see that, within the extent that you can.
I mean, look, we went to CSM Summit and Villy really made a good case that capital ecosystem is perfect as it stands. So we've canceled all work.
I'm strangely comfortable with it.
We have a lot on the way. I wish I could get into specifics, but I feel like we're through phase 1 for both capitals and structures. With structures, we tried to make some changes to timers. I think we need to keep revisiting that until we get the best setup we can. With capitals, we've done a lot with application, with bosons. We removed Haas from Titans. So we've started the path in both areas, but we have a lot still to do for structures. Probably next on the chopping block is looking at low power and trying to figure out something we can do there so that structures that aren't powered are not as useful and as common. And then after that, a big thing we really want to start experimenting with is what you get for killing structures, how rewarding it is to go out and burn stuff down. Right now you get a kill mail, but it's a lot of work. Often the structures are cheap, and so it doesn't feel gratifying at all. And we have a lot of options for both making it literally more rewarding and making it harder for people to frustrate you with spam. And so I think of that as sort of a phase 3, hopefully in not too long, but the low power stuff on shorter term. And then for capitals, yes, definitely HP and survivability is a big piece. We did spend, jokes aside, a lot of time in the summit talking about what we would like kind of a healthy capital escalation chain to look like. And we have a big step towards that coming very soon. And then we want to look a little bit after that at rounding out some more answers, things like stronger sub-capital options versus capitals so that you can punch back even if the umbrella gets dropped on you. More kind of diverse tactics within the capital ecosystem itself. But the basics of just getting a healthy escalation from subcaps to carriers and dreads, which apply fine to subcaps, and then to supers and titans, which don't apply well to subcaps at all. And all of them having kind of a sane amount of survivability so that it's possible to get kills on both sides. That's all lined up for work I mean, in some cases lined up for deployment, but in a lot of cases lined up for longer term work as well. So yeah, I'm excited to keep moving. We have a really good clip right now on this stuff, and we're far from finished. So hang in there a little bit longer, and we'll have more changes coming. Big ones.
Okay, well, sort of as a follow up here, and again, this might not be something that you guys can really speak to, and I understand that. Way back in the day when Citadels were, I mean, I guess it wasn't really that far back in the day anymore, but when Citadels were first getting introduced, it seemed, and there was discussion surrounding Citadels as an eventual replacement for the FOSI-SOV, Aegis-SOV, whatever you want to call it, system, because it looked like all of these structures that were going in were using the Citadel mechanics, and that you could then essentially have the functions of an iHub being bolted into a Citadel, and then none of us ever have to worry about intosising again, and we can all slap fight over structures once that's sort of like dialed in. And nobody wants to spend a whole bunch of time reworking the soft system only to have everybody declare that they hate it. So I understand that there's like a lot of resistance to trying to tilt at that particular windmill again. But the structure stuff is getting more and more refined in a positive way. Like, I really like the fact that you guys have been iterating on it. Is there any possibility, is it still on the table for having a revisions to the soft system that incorporate more aspects of improved structures?
Yeah, absolutely. SOV has,
fuck. Okay.
I mean, it has sat a little further back in the priority list for like since Talos got off the ground and we started talking about trying to make iterative changes in a lot of these important veteran areas. SOV has definitely felt like a little behind work on Citadels and Capitals especially. We have started conversations about it. We talked about it a decent amount at the summit, but I do think we have a couple more passes at these things before we start making the same kind of iterative passes at SOV, but it's definitely on the table as something. I mean, obviously it's something super important, and if we can consolidate, there's also a lot of potential, I think, for SOV to, something we've been talking a lot about is what kind of commitment you make to strategic power or to resource gathering, and we want to do a lot of do whatever we can to make the range of objectives more diverse and rewarding for people that are looking for fights and people that are looking to have different types of motivations for conflict, basically. And I think SOV will move into the conversation more as we get to that. I feel like right now we're still trying to sort of fix things and just get ourselves to a healthy enough place to start expanding, but we're getting there. And I think the next step will be, how can we, make it so there's more to gain and more interesting options for how to go and disrupt people's space, or how to look at fighting over things that you care about.
Yeah, and just to sort of reinforce that, I think that if there was going to be, in the original plan of having the Citadel mechanics gradually replace aspects of the SOV system, then we can't really put the cart before the horse here, right? Like, you guys you're already committing to looking at how do you deal with low power structures. You're looking at the reward for getting, clearing out structures that are undefended. Like, if we go glass tribute, why would we do that if the bad guys just run away? And so I actually kind of see like a path to victory here for you guys, because if you make the gameplay surrounding structures really tight and good and refined, then it's a much easier step to sell it to the players, and it'll be a better experience if then there's structure related soft stuff. So all of that sounds actually quite, I don't really know what to do when I get good news.
Right. Well, that's what I was about to say. One of the things I want to just comment to you guys, and I can't say I'm speaking for anybody but myself here, but I will say thank you. It seems to me, at least in the last 5 or 6 months, that EVE development as a whole, and I'm not going to praise one team or another, because I think, in the end, the way that it sounds like is that you guys are working a lot of cross-team stuff, and that there are people doing stuff on all different aspects of the game, but they're working together and coming up with stuff and putting it together. EVE Dev is working great. I mean, it seems like you guys are firing on all cylinders, and you're getting stuff right, and you're getting stuff in that players want and they're excited about, and that makes me happy. Because I'll tell you, as much as I'm willing to smack you guys when I think you're doing the wrong stuff, I also want to make sure that we praise you guys when you're doing the right stuff. And the stuff that we've been seeing lately, the fact that, everybody screamed, hey, we should make these Christmas filaments permanent, and then it happened. That we're getting stuff that players want to see after years of bitching about, capitals are too powerful, that you guys are actively talking about EHP nerfs and that subcaps and capitals aren't interacting the right way. So you're making changes on every 2-week basis. I mean, this is what we've asked for. You guys are giving it to us. I think I very much appreciate that. And I think the entire company should get an attaboy for that, because it's not just one group, or one person. We happen to talk to you guys more than anybody else. So I want to make sure that, for the folks out there that are back there supporting you and doing all that kind of stuff, we know what you're doing and we appreciate it. And and from the
like
from
useless
this player,
producer,
thank
them
you.
too.
Yeah, exactly.
A signal.
Right.
Don't get me down that hole. No.
One of the things that I sort of want to go off on, I guess I'm going to sort of end the show with something similar to a rant, is that, we know CCP has been very clear about the fact that they are investing a tremendous amount of time into the new player experience and refining that. And, the position of the state has always been that this is actually a good thing. And I think the evidence of that has been shown, not only with the fact that when the localization in Korea was launched, we've actually seen a buildup of a new time zone successfully in terms of attracting and retaining new players, but also, the pandemic situation is horrible, right? Like, there's no other way around it. The pandemic situation is awful, but the net effect is that there's going to be a lot more people who are online looking for something to do during a lockdown. And, I think that EVE is in a really good position as a very well-developed, all-consuming game to attract and retain a lot of players that otherwise wouldn't have given it the time of day, precisely because of the pandemic and the lockdown. So, I want to make it very clear, like, one of the things that we on the meta show and in nullsec, we're always like team tail us, like, oh, they're going to do this, oh, this is cool, or that, whatever. But attracting and retaining new talent into the sandbox itself is critical. And we haven't really seen a lot of the things that have happened with the NPE stuff yet, because we're veteran players. We're on the other side of that. But if there has ever been a time where it is important from a business perspective and from a player ecosystem health perspective to have, so many developers working on how do you get people to play EVE and how do you keep them? Those guys don't get enough shout outs because they're sort of unseen. And I think it's very important, particularly at this time. So that's sort of my sort of formal Imperium stance on things.
Yeah. Can I comment on
please
both
go
those
nuts.
things? I mean, mostly I just completely echo what you're saying in terms of our position relative to a bad situation. I feel really lucky that EVE is better at kind of social, like virtual social relationships than almost anything else. And that's lucky for us. And I hope we can welcome a lot of people as people feel isolated. I think EVE is, the more we look into the effect of EVE on people, the more we see that it's as close as you can get to real world relationships. And, it really makes a difference in people's lives. So at a time when people need options outside of, physical options for relationships, it's really cool to be able to be involved in EVE. And back to what Brisk was saying, mostly thank you so much. It was really exciting to hear, that things are feeling good from your perspective. I joked about producers because Kali has a new one on his team that we like to pick on, but it really does feel like a great time for
shout out to him.
From our side, it feels like we're in a really cool place where we're building up a lot of momentum. We're moving faster than usual, hitting more areas of the game, and it's pretty exciting to be a part of. I would just ask to, I'm excited. I think iterative changes on some of these big systems is really exciting, but also these systems are freaking impossible. And I expect us to be in these loops for a long time. I think we can get to a better place fast with things like structures and capitals, but also I expect to be fighting against problems in capital balance for probably the rest of my life, until I get that stored and get to leave CCP forever. We're going to be trying to figure out the best way to set it up. So as long as we can all be happy that things are moving and trying to move to a better place, that's awesome. And it's great to hear that feels good for now.
Very good.
I also think that, it's a healthy indicator to the veteran players that CCP is investing in the future of EVE. Like, that we want.
Yeah, nobody wants to rule over a dead world, right?
Exactly
Right.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. I think we're about out of time. We went a little bit over today, but that tends to happen when we have a good show.
It was
that
because
we're
I was
interested in,
talking
so.
about my fashion for too long. It's my fault.
No,
I forgot
no. We
I
need
fa-
we need to spend more time on that, definitely.
Just one more thing, so my team doesn't kill me. But there's of course there's going to be an extra challenge, 10,000 skill points for killing the NPC in the factional warfare capture site, and the Champions of Lowsec, of course, is coming out
Right,
as well.
that's coming out. Yep.
It's going to be super interesting. Winners get flag over our new headquarters. It's gonna be
I hope
Hey,
you
Signal,
guys are looking
someone-
forward to seeing an Imperium flag flying over your head.
I feel like the king of Lowsec. I know that's how I identify primarily as a Lowsec player. So
There you go. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having CCP Rise, CCP Signal on the show today. And I think, from Mittens and I, we appreciate that you guys were willing to sit down. I know
always
the
fun,
audience
guys.
cared about it. Unfortunately, I wish we didn't have so many good things in Eve going on at the same time. So hopefully people will go back and watch
Good problem to have.
the video on exactly the video on demand. If you're interested and you want to go see Eve versus Twitch, it's still ongoing. I think Bjorn B is streaming right now. If you guys want to go check that out after the show. One last thing from me. Nurgle range buff, please. Thank you. And
I'll do
I have
it
to mention
alongside the Tech 2 salvage drones.
Oh, there you go. All right, perfect. There you go. But I think from us, from all of us in the Meta Show, stay safe, have a good weekend, and we will see you next Saturday on the Meta Show. You stay classy, New Eden.
cheers, guys.